After studying this module, you shall be able to know the correlation between fingerprints and ridges on the fingertips, the function of finger ridges, fundamental principles on which the science of fingerprinting is based, the broad patterns of fingerprints, how fingerprints may be used for individualization. Fingerprints are the distinctive ridges appearing as corrugated lines on the tips of fingers and thumbs. The corrugation results due to rising of a portion of the upper layer of fingertip skin slightly above the normal level. Since the upper layer of skin is called epidermis, the finger ridges are also referred to as epidermal ridges. The depression between two ridges is called a furrow or a valley. The ridges and valleys form a complex curved pattern on the fingertips. The pattern on each finger of a person is so unique that it is not repeated on another finger of the same person or on the fingers of any other person. This makes fingerprints the most infallible means of identification. Locating a fingerprint. Locating a fingerprint often requires a vigilant and calculated search. However, in circumstances where the print is visible to the naked eye, finding a fingerprint is relatively easy. The more intricate searches take place where the print is present on a surface but not visible. The type of fingerprint left behind usually determines the amount of time and effort investigators must put into locating the print. According to forensic science, there are three types of fingerprints. First is the patent print, which are easy to locate since they are visible to the naked eye. Patent prints occur when someone has a substance on their fingers such as grease, paint, blood or ink that leaves a visible print on a surface. The second type is plastic prints, which are also easy to locate but are less common than patent prints since they occur when someone touches an object such as wax, butter or soap and leaves a three-dimensional impression on the finger of the object. The third type of fingerprints are latent prints. These are the most common types of prints and take the most effort to locate them since they are invisible. Latent prints occur when someone touches any porous or non-porous surface. The natural oils and residues on finger leave a deposition on the surface which is the mirror image of the ridges and furrows that are present on the individual's fingers. Investigators often follow a two-phase process when searching the fingerprints. The first phase involves looking for patent and plastic prints since they are visible. Oftentimes, a flashlight is used during this phase. The second phase involves a blind search for latent prints. To narrow down the search, investigators usually focus on the entry and exit points that the suspect used and any item that appears to have been disturbed, such as an overturned lamp or possible weapons. The type of surface being searched for fingerprints often determines the technique employed by the investigator.
Functions of finger ridges. We touch things every day: a coffee cup, a car door, a computer keyboard. Each time we do, it is likely that we leave behind our unique signature in our fingerprints. No two people have exactly the same fingerprints. Even identical twins with identical DNA have different fingerprints. This uniqueness allows fingerprints to be used in all sorts of ways, including for background checks, biometric security, mass disaster identification, and of course, in criminal situations. Fingerprint analysis has been used to identify suspects and solve crimes for more than 100 years, and it remains an extremely valuable tool for law enforcement. One of the important uses for fingerprint is to help investigators link one crime scene to another involving the same person. Fingerprint identification also helps investigators to track a criminal's record, their previous arrest and convictions to aid in sentencing, probation, parole, and pardoning decisions. Finger ridges have an average width of 0.48 millimeters in males and 0.43 millimeters in females. First, they increase security of contact with objects. That is, the ridges are studded with small holes called sweat pores through which perspiration is exuded. Second is they enhance the sense of touch. When a finger comes into contact with an uneven surface, the epidermal ridges amplify the vibrations caused due to frictions and transmit the signal to sensory nerves involved in texture perception, increasing the sense of touch. For this reason, epidermal ridges are also called friction ridges. Now we will learn about the fundamental principles of fingerprinting. Fingerprints are unique patterns made by friction ridges, raised and recessed, which appear on the pads of fingers and thumbs. Prints from palms, toes, and feet are also unique. However, these are used less often for identification. So, this guide focuses on prints from the fingers and thumbs. The science of identification by screening and comparing fingerprints is called Dectelloscopy. This science is based on the three principles. First, no two person and no two fingers of the same person have identical ridges designed on the fingertips. Fingertips are absolutely unique, more unique than the DNA, the genetic material in the human cells. Although identical twins have same DNA sequencing, they do not have identical fingerprints. Second, the fingerprints remain unchanged throughout life. The ridge pattern begins to take shape during fetal stage and does not alter during a person's lifespan. It is only after death that decomposition sets in and the finger ridges are destroyed. In the growing age, the fingerprint pattern expands. As a result of aging, it may shrink. However, the basic design remains the same. Third, fingerprints can be classified for record keeping. When a person commits a crime and is arrested, he is fingerprinted by the police. The fingerprint record is then passed on to the nearest fingerprint bureau. There are about 25 state level fingerprint bureaus in India. Their functioning is coordinated by Central Fingerprint Bureau under Ministry of Home Affairs. Each bureau maintains a catalog of fingerprints. The mathematical formula for classifying fingerprints was worked out in the Bengal Bureau, the world's first fingerprint bureau, established at Calcutta, now Kolkata, in 1897. The two underlying premises of fingerprint identification are uniqueness and persistence. To date, no two people have ever been found to have the same fingerprints, excluding identical twins. In addition, no single person has ever been found to have the same fingerprint on multiple fingers. Persistence, also referred to as permanence, is the principle that a person's fingerprints remain essentially unchanged throughout their lifetime. As new skin cells form, they remain cemented in the existing friction ridge and pattern. In fact, many people have conducted research that confirms this persistency by recording the same fingerprints over decades and observing that features remains the same. Even attempts to remove or damage one's fingerprint will be thwarted when the new skin grows, unless the damage is extremely deep, in which case the new arrangement caused by the damage will now persist and is also unique. Next is the proof is the minutiae. Analysts use the general pattern type, that is, loop, whirl, or arc, to make initial comparison and include or exclude a known fingerprint from further analysis. To match a print, the analyst uses the minutiae or ridge characteristics to identify specific points on a suspect fingerprint with the same information in a known fingerprints. For example, an analyst comparing a crime scene print to a print on a file would first gather known prints with the same general pattern type. Then, using a loop, compare the prints side by side to identify specific information within the minutiae that match. If enough details correlated, the fingerprints are determined to be from the same person. Now let us learn about fingerprint patterns. There are three broad patterns of fingerprints, that is, the arcs, loops, and the whirl. In arc pattern, an epidermal ridge starts from left or right, rises like a tent, and flows back to the right or left. In loop, the ridge initiates from left or right, recurves and comes back to the left or right. The whirl pattern, as its name implies, it is similar to the whirlpool, having a design of concentric circle lines. As has already been stated, arcs, loops, and whirls represented only a broad classification of fingerprint patterns. There are several subcategories under each of these classifications. The fingerprint, such as the print left when an inked finger is pressed onto paper, is that of the friction ridges on that particular finger. Friction ridge patterns are grouped into three distinct types: loops, whirls, and arcs, each with unique variation depending on the shape and the relationship of the ridges. Now, first is loop. Prints that recurve back on themselves to form a loop shape, divided into radial loop pointing towards the radius bone or thumb, and ulnar loop pointing towards the ulna bone or the pinky. Loops account for approximately 60% of pattern types. Next is whorls. From circular or spiral patterns like tiny whirlpools, there are four groups of whorls: plane, that is concentric circles; central pocket loop, that is a loop with whorl at the end; double loop, that is two loops that create an S-like pattern; and accidental loop, that is irregular shape. Whorls make up about 35% of pattern types. Next is arcs. It create a wave-like pattern and include plane arcs and tented arcs. Tented arcs rise to a sharper point than the plane arcs. Arcs make up about 5% of all patterns. A curiosity glance at fingerprint induces a presupposition that ridges follow parallel to each other. However, a closer scrutiny reveals that the parallel trend is interrupted by irregularities known as fingerprint characters or minutiae. The seven common types of fingerprint characters are: first is ridge termination or ridge ending, when the ridge flow abruptly ends. Second is bifurcation, when the ridge splits into two, making a Y. Next is lake, when there is an enclosed area in between the ridge. Next is island or ridge dot, when there is a small dot or circle within the overall print. Next is short independent ridge, when there is a relatively small ridge within the overall pattern. Next is hook or spur, when a small curved ridge is attached to a regular ridge. Next, crossover. In this, two parallel ridges are joined by a single small ridge. For example, three minutiae are identified. These are bifurcation, ridge ending or termination, and island or ridge dot. A set of minutiae within the overall pattern makes each fingerprint unique. In no two fingers identical minutiae could occupy exactly similar position, even if the overall ridge pattern, that is arc, loop or whorl, is the same. In case of identical twins, the overall ridge pattern on similar fingers of the siblings is identical. For example, if one sibling has an arc pattern on left thumb and other sibling too have the arc pattern on the left thumb. Nevertheless, the location of minutiae in the two fingers will vary. Thus, even identical twins can be individualized by fingerprints. If a finger is superficially injured to a depth of 1 millimeter or less, a part of the ridge pattern or some of the ridge characters get temporarily damaged. Upon healing, the pattern and characters reappear in their original form. However, a deeper injury causes permanent damage to a portion of ridge pattern and ridge characters. In such cases, a scar remains even after the finger is healed. Yet, it does not render the fingerprint useless as far as identification is concerned. On an average, there are about 80 ridge characters in a fingerprint. According to the Indian law, the location of 8 characteristics is enough to individualize a person. This means that if the placement of 8 characteristics in a fingerprint lifted from a crime scene matches with the inked fingerprint of a person, then the latter is the accused. Thus, even 1/10 of total characters on a fingertip can be visualized. The identity of the person can still be established. Fingerprints can be used in all sorts of ways. First, it provides biometric security. For example, to control access to secure areas or systems. Second, identifying amnesia victims and unknown deceased, such as victims of major disasters, if their fingerprints are on file. Next, conducting background checks, including application for government employment, defense, security clearance, concealed weapon permits, etc. Fingerprints are especially important in the criminal justice realm. Investigators and analysts can compare unknown prints collected from a crime scene to the known prints of victims, witnesses, and potential suspects to assist in criminal cases. For example, a killer may leave their fingerprints on the suspected murderer weapon. A bank robber's fingerprint may be found on a robbery note. In an assault case, the perpetrator may have left fingerprints on the victim's skin. A burglar may leave fingerprints on a broken window pane. A thief's fingerprint may be found on a safe. In addition, fingerprints can link a perpetrator to other unsolved crimes if investigators have reason to compare them, or if prints from unsolved crime turn up as a match during a database search. Sometimes these unknown prints linking multiple crimes can help investigators piece together enough information to zero in on the culprit. In the absence of DNA, fingerprints are used by the criminal justice system to verify a convicted offender's identity and track their previous arrests and convictions. Criminal tendencies known associates with other useful information. Officers of the court can also use these records to help make decisions regarding a criminal's sentence, probation, parole, or pardon. Fingerprints found on practically any solid surface, including the human body. Analysts classify fingerprint into three categories according to the type of the surface on which they are found and whether they are visible or not. Fingerprint on soft surfaces such as soap, wax, wet paint, etc. are likely to be three-dimensional plastic prints. Those on hard surfaces like patent or latent prints which are visible and invisible. Visible prints are formed when blood, dirt, ink, paint, etc. is transferred from a finger or thumb to a surface. Patent prints can be formed on a wide variety of surfaces like smooth or rough, porous such as paper, cloth or wood, or non-porous such as metal, glass, or plastic. Latent prints are formed when the body's natural oil and sweat on the skin are deposited onto another surface. Latent prints can be found on a variety of surfaces. However, they are not readily visible, and detection often requires the use of fingerprint powder, chemical reagents, or alternate light sources. Generally speaking, the smoother and less porous a surface is, the greater the potential that any latent print present can be found and developed.
Summary. The science of fingerprinting is based on the premise that no two persons and no two fingers of the same person have identical designs on their fingertips. Moreover, fingerprints remain unchanged from birth till death. These may be classified for criminal record keeping. There are three broad patterns of fingerprints: arches, loops, and whorls. Within these patterns are embedded irregularities called fingerprints characters or minutiae. On an average, 80 minutiae are present on a fingertip. The position of only 8 is required to individualize a person. Thus, even a partial print found at a scene of crime is enough to establish the identity of the accused.